Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Art School Graduate Podcast. My name is Justin Robinson.
And I'm Badir McCleary, and we're back with episode 2, where we're excited. Thank you for listening to episode 1. We were very, very excited to get started with this podcast.
Yes.
There's tons of just great stuff to talk about throughout this art world, and we got some really cool topics today. What you think, Justin?
The ones we're going to dive into, I feel will probably help people understand what we struggle with in this art world a little bit better, because
definitely.
Was it Picasso that said great artists don't create, they steal? Who was that? Was it him?
I think it was Picasso. I think it was like good artists create and like great artists steal or something like that. I can't remember the right quote about that, but we're going to talk about a little bit of that theft this episode.
Yes.
So a lot of artists and dealers and people in the art world and even outside of the art world may have heard about the name Lynn Goldsmith. Not too many people might be familiar with her work outside of one special project. Justin, it's these Prince photographs that she took from Prince's studio that a certain someone who's worth a huge percent of the art market used for a project around, I think it was like in the early 80s. I'm not sure. I'll fact check it while we go along. But he took those, actually 81. Goldsmith was commissioned to shoot these series of photos of our beloved Prince. And that artist that we were talking about took those photos and created artworks of those photos. So you want to tell them what artist we're talking about?
Everybody's favorite artist, Andy Warhol.
Andy.
He is the epitome of what Picasso said, which is good artists borrow, great artists steal.
Yes, there it is. There's the direct quote.
Yes, there's the direct quote,
right?
That is the direct quote. I'm telling you guys. But my take on it, and I know we are very polar opposites. Like, this is probably one of the few positions we don't agree upon in the art world.
Mm-hmm.
But I think personally it should be a 3-way split, because I just
in what way? Okay, let's break it down for our listeners. A 3-way split in what way? Break it down for them.
So, one, because you're using Prince's identity, so automatically his trust, because he's not here with us no longer, his trust, or whoever's in trust, and like whoever is in charge of that, should receive a piece of it, because it's his likeness. It's just like we all have heard of Shaq's investments and how he's invested into this firm that owns the likeness of Elvis and Marilyn Monroe. So whoever uses it, that firm gets a piece of it. So I feel that that's one. That's the first one. 2 should definitely be the photographer, strictly because without the photographer telling Prince how to pose and position, we wouldn't have never seen these pictures ever. They wouldn't have came out. So that's 2. And 3 is Warhol. Everybody knows his take on art, right? So everybody understands that what he's trying to do with this isn't like brand new. He's just changing it. He's creating it. He's giving a different look to it, giving it a different eye, adding his twist onto it. So I think it should be a 3-way split to that point. Now, how much each one should get is very different. Like, I feel that because it's Prince and the photographer, their cut should definitely be a little bit higher, versus Warhol's, who's, like, let's be honest, like, it's not like he did a whole lot except like crop the head out pretty much, or the body out, and do something like that. So that's my take on it. But I know you feel totally opposite because we were having this discussion earlier. So, Badir, break it down for us. Why don't you think this should work, or what is your take on it?
All right. So, with a little bit of experience about writing about a few of these is there's a few points that I do agree with your take. Um there is this that the likeness. We're dealing with that now in, college basketball, with the players, with name, image and
Yes,
likeness.
yes,
That's becoming a huge thing now. So yes, Prince, his estate. And I'm sure this case was, still being battled while Prince was alive. I would have loved, because this didn't just pop up. This has been going on for a
yeah,
while.
yeah.
So I would love to have gotten Prince's take on this, because he would have had something glorious to say in a one
But
liner.
exactly. But we have to understand this too. Prince is the dude that didn't put out an album and wrote slave on his face because they wouldn't let him
Facts,
get his master. So I know for a fact,
facts.
I know for a fact, unless him and Warhol
Hmm.
or Goldstein has this, you know, little trust that
No,
they mess with each other and they're homies, then I get it. But
so here's where it gets really really good. So there's four entities in this that I think. You
okay,
have you have Prince, as we mentioned. You have Lynn Goldsmith, the photographer. You have Vanity Fair, who commissioned the project, and you have Warhol. So you have four levels of this. So now we talked about Prince, the name, image, and likeness. We have the photographer who did the work. This was, as they reported, it was before Prince, really started to take off. They were saying it was before, like, just before Purple Rain and all that. So Prince was still Prince, but he was about to really, like, become who we know Prince to be. So Lynn was commissioned by Vanity Fair. I'm sorry, not by Vanity Fair. She took the photos of Prince in her studio, and then Vanity Fair licensed those photos to use in their publication of Prince. So in a sense, it was like, she was, let's say, commissioned. I don't know if it fully was a commission, but let's just say she was licensed. She took the photos, licensed. Um, they were given the rights to use those. So at this point, you have a rights transfer. Obviously, if she's in Prince's studio, Prince has given her the permission to use or to take those photos.
okay.
Now, from that point, ownership is transferred. Now, we don't know. At least I haven't read. Might have to do some research on it. If Goldsmith paid Prince for that session, then I think the full ownership at that point is with Goldsmith. But if it was a joint thing, like, we do sometimes where photographers might photograph an artist or a musician for their portfolio. If that was for a portfolio, then you have a case. You have a case with the name, image, and likeness. Like, yo, you're using my likeness to promote your career. A lot of people do. We live in LA. There's a case for that on every corner.
Well, we've
You know
even
what I mean?
seen that even in hip hop too, where it
Yes.
was the brother that passed away, the famous photographer that shot most of like um
Ricky Powell.
I believe so. I believe so. Where he shot a lot of like the hip hop covers and a lot of the hip hop artists, like even I can't think of their names, but we'll come back to them. But I
Hmm.
know exactly what you're talking about because it's like they've shot it now, but then people are using those images now for like airbrushing T-shirts. They're making those vintage
Mm,
clothings come back, and it's just like, wait, that's my picture. How are you going to not give me
hmm.
credit on my picture for your clothing
Yeah.
brand? So yeah, I
Actually,
can
I
see that.
think I think that might be Chimodu, because
Chimodu,
there's
yes,
Chimodu.
yes,
Yeah, that's
yes, yes.
Chimodu. Yeah.
That's Chimodu because he was around during that time where it
Hmm.
was
Ill
um
photographer. Ill
yes,
photographer.
and he shot in black and white, and I loved it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I remember that his estate was going through that because so many people didn't know that he was the artist or the
Yeah.
photographer of many of them. So they were going after people and companies because they're finding these images online and not paying attention that
Hmm.
so and so article used this, but they had permission, but they're just going to take it and repurpose it.
Yes.
So that's one of
Yes.
those. like
So so
things.
that so
Yeah.
that's why Lynn Goldsmith's part in this is so important because if she's taken ownership of those photos, she's now given the the right of use to Vanity Fair for their article, right?
Yes.
So now you have that permission. Okay, Prince let Lynn inside the studio. Lynn allowed Vanity Fair for the cost to use these photos. Everything up until that, the chain of custody or whatever you call it to me is good, right? So Andy comes to the party with that, and we don't know. I mean, at least I don't. That he called Lynn. He's ever seen Lynn's work before this, visited any of Lynn's exhibitions or shows, or even just came across her work. It could be a situation. There was no internet, so how
Yeah.
did he find her work? Was it through the Vanity Fair article? Most likely, right? So
Yes.
he maybe purchased an article, maybe picked it up at a newsstand and decided this was a great image. I'm going to use this. Where do we just absolve him because he's some great artist that he can't ask permission, or that he's not, or that he's above asking the artist or anybody in that chain for permission?
No, we can't. He has to be included in it because he had a monetary gain off of it.
Exactly. So
That's what
like
it
now,
comes down to.
that's what it comes down to. Now, so when we were talking about, before we started to broadcast, and we were talking about like the art practice side of it, right?
Yeah.
If Warhol was using these works and showing different sides of practice, but like, you know what? I'm not I'm not Warholing these, you know what I mean? Making
Right.
them
Right.
making them real big, he's taking them into a different space. And a lot of people will argue that, the transformative property of the work is now different because now that Warhol touched it and put his stink on it, if you will, it's become a Warhol. What do you think about that? I know you got something to say about that one.
I I still feel how I felt at the beginning. I feel that even though he did do his Warhol-esque, his percentage should
Mhm.
be a little bit lower. But I
But
don't
why
agree.
a percentage at all?
Because it's the crazy thing is he made something off of it. Like art galleries covet Warhols. We all know that.
Hmm.
We know and respect that like Warhol is the guy that switched it up during the time of art where everybody was getting bored with it. He stepped
Yes,
in and
commercialism.
yeah, and he made it seem like, oh, so this is what we can do like with the Campbell's soup can. Like if that's the case, then Campbell's got to get their cut off of that. If that's the case, then they got to get the box, I'm drawing a blank, the
Yeah, the
scrub it,
Brillo
the
box.
Brillo box.
Yeah, I mean, like that's kind of like when the NFT, degenerates, how they call themselves, in these groups were screaming Duchamp, for
Yeah,
everything in the beginning. It's
yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's 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 one of those type of things to where it's like, okay, is Warhol just repeating a history that he studied? You know, um, I could argue that, or I could argue that it was just him seeing something in the public space, and personalizing it for his monetary gain. You
But
know.
the way I think Warhol possibly, now this is possibly, is because the way people see
Hmm.
him, they saw him as a transformative artist. You
Yes.
know, they that all he did was take photographs and make you look at them in a different light. So it's almost like it goes back to what you said. It's like he just took his practice and found a way to make money off of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but that's what every artist hopes to do, right?
Yeah.
But, at the same time, most artists, and I guess this goes to the quote we led the show off with, most artists try not to steal to create their own thing. But at this point, Warhol he wasn't a new emerging artist.
Okay,
He
yeah.
was set in stone, with his creativity. So him taking that is literally robbing Lynn Goldsmith, in my opinion, of that ability to shine. see, now she's fighting for years. She's been fighting, and now she looks as like the poor artist who's claiming that someone stole from me, which in essence I believe happened. You know what I mean? Like, she's not getting her day.
But that's why I say, and that's why I just feel that it should be Prince. I was about to say John, not John, but Glenn. It should be that, and Warhol should be smaller.
I But who's going to that's another thing. Who's going to manage that? In the art world, there's no VARA rights at this point. Well, at that point, I'm sorry.
I just think
There's
it sets
Yeah,
a very dangerous precedent off of like.
it
So
does.
it's like, if they were to go back and just be like, you know what, I think this is literally left up to Goldsmiths and Prince's place. It's just like,
Mhm.
so we have other modern artists that we've spoken about that are going through the same thing. That means everything they've worked for,
Yes.
they would have to give it up. Our
I
brother,
don't think it invalidates that.
you don't
I
think
don't think it
so?
invalidates it though. No, no, no. I don't think it invalidates what comes before. Like, if there's a new law, I think if her case wins, she'll win that case. But I don't think that invalidates every artwork before. So, like, when we talk about like a Richard Prince, or you were getting ready to bring up like a Knowledge Bennett
Yes.
with the Jeanette Beckman case,
Yes.
with the photography with the Slick Rick.
Yes.
I don't think that invalidates what they've done before. I think going forward, because that work's already done, like that work's not in
Oh, but they're
progress.
going to come for that money, bro. That's what it comes down to.
But they're
Because
gonna always come for it. They're gonna always come
so
for it.
that's why I think if they were to set it to the point where it becomes the two originators and then the
Hmm.
third person, or it's almost like a will, or a
Hmm.
like when your family leaves you like property or something. You know how it's like a trust. It's just like it
Yeah.
gets passed down through generation to generation. You're not going to get a full 100% because it gets broken up and diluted amongst the children. It gets broken up and diluted amongst the grandchildren. So I feel that the two originators, Prince and
Hmm.
Goldsmith, should receive the larger chunk. Now, Warhol came in. Of course, he did something different. Of course, it brought people to see Prince. It, I don't want to say it and sound like too like crazy, but it almost feels like it gave him that little bit of elevation to like Prince's mystique, because it's like when you see the
Hmm.
Warhols of Prince, it almost is like that is Prince. Like we understand him as this colorful, this very mystique kind of guy. So it's not like Warhol was too far off, but I just feel that his percentage should be a little bit lower.
Well, I mean, I could also argue that when you are, just off of history, when you are iconized or iconicized, whatever the word is right now, I'm a little tired, but um, when Warhol throws you on a portrait, that puts you on another level in society, in celebrity culture,
Yes.
that
Yes.
elevates you amongst the glitterati, of society. It puts you in that fold. I mean, when you look at, any films or things like that of the 70s and 80s, especially, or even in the 60s in certain eras, you see those Warhol, Marilyns, or you see that
Yeah.
the Muhammad Ali, or any type of photo of these celebrities that were the hot stuff of that era. You know what I mean? So Warhol elevates, that celebrity status. So you could argue that that was Warhol's way of promoting Prince. If you're bringing it to the way that you're saying. So, but if you look at it on the market side, it's like, with all of that, let's say they, everything you're saying is great, and they can gather and pay for generations, having a state and all that. Who's paying that money? Who's gathering that money? Is that the gallery, or does that fall on the artist? Because the gallery, right, is creating that marketplace to be able to sell these at a certain price.
I feel that it should fall on whoever purchased it, because whoever purchased it had to pay someone for that. There's receipts there
Mm-hmm.
that, like many of these foundations that have these pieces, they paid
Mm-hmm.
for them. Let it be through Sotheby's, or what's the other big one over in London? I
Of
can't.
Christie's.
Yes, that one. So they
Mm-hmm.
have people and buyers that are constantly looking to build and strengthen these portfolios. So it's like, oh, okay, so Sotheby's got it and they sold it to you for X number of dollars. Okay, well, based
Mm-hmm.
on this court case, a certain percentage of that needs to go to the two originators, and then whatever's left gets paid to this. Now, does that maybe increase the value of the artwork? Yeah, because you know, everybody's got to eat. Sotheby's ain't handing out free artworks around here at
They
they're
definitely
not they're
not
not slapping a 50% off deal. Okay, so it's like, I feel that it
at
needs to
all.
be traced back through purchases, and I don't think that's a tough thing
But
to do unless they're hiding them off on offshore accounts. Then that's a different conversation.
well, yeah, I was going to say, yeah, the
Yeah.
finances of all that. We would need a whole new episode to talk
Oh
about
yeah.
that. But it also, when you look at the provenance of these pieces, it's like, are you talking about going back and putting a percentage on the sale, almost a tax on every single owner? Because you have to go, or does just the current owner face the brunt of that? And then if you start to do that to where you're starting to penalize collectors, that's going to stop buying. It's one of those things
Is
like
it though?
with that with I mean, think about it. There's a lot of collectors out there with royalties. If they have to pay a certain thing and then pay a royalty, there's many collectors that's like, yo, I would just work with dead. I mean, not work with. I would just buy dead artists.
Yeah.
Like,
I do, but I think if you have the money to buy one of these pieces, you're not
mhm.
splitting hairs. Me personally, I don't think they're splitting hairs over royalty, because all it's doing is to me, I think it's driving up the value of that piece.
Yeah, I agree with royalties. Like, I'm a huge fan. Let me make it clear. I'm a huge fan of artists getting royalties for their work. I just don't think collectors are. Like, if a collector, because think about, all of the business, like we talked about, that goes on with collecting, from taxes to foundations and more. If I now have to cut in someone consistently after I pay the lump sum to which they automatically get 50%, they're going to cut down on the purchasing. The reason why a lot of people purchase art, besides those reasons we mentioned, is because it's social
Right.
currency. Now, once the social currency gets too expensive or not worth it to them, and they can buy something that's a little bit more tangible, like a Ferrari or something else, they're going to do that.
Yeah.
Like, they don't have to keep paying Ferrari every time they drive it onto to a new state, or show it in a new house, or if they want to resell it. They don't, even if it's an old classic car, they don't have to pay royalties to that brand. So that royalty on luxury items thing is not making a lot of sense for a lot of collectors, in my opinion.
I I can see that, but I
Hmm.
think, okay, so I think it should be from, because many of these pieces are bought through auction houses. I'm not going to say 100% of them, but many of them are purchased through these auction houses, because it's rare to find a private collector that's been holding on to these for so long, without.
The Warhol
Yes.
pieces, right? Not the
No, no, no,
contemporary
no. The
ones.
Warhol
Okay. Okay.
pieces, like, because we
Yes.
understand through science, like heat, weather, time, the type of paint he was using, the type of ink, the type of screen printing. We all
Hmm.
understand that those Warhol pieces aren't going to sustain time. So I
Hmm.
feel that if the auction house has them, then the auction house needs to tax. They need to be taxed on who they bought it from.
Well, the auction house doesn't have them. So that's the thing. Like, they're
But
not
they're getting
holding
a
these pieces.
percentage of it, though.
But that's just because they're used as the vehicle for the transaction. and that's because they're bringing that piece, to the record. There's plenty of dark deals
Yeah.
that go on behind the scenes
Absolutely.
that, you know
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
That never make it to the
Right,
floor,
right,
to
right,
the
right, right.
hammer, because we're thinking you make a great point, because, the hammer
Yeah,
price, that's the only real medium that we can tell that a piece has been sold. We can't really trust the gallery's records. We
yeah,
can't really trust all these bills of sale. So that auction house is that almost end all be all for fine art purchasing. Let's say that. But we also know that there's deals that go on that, in the back end, that are like, look, like, take this, here's this transfer. Nobody got to know about it. This is what it is. We don't need to pay the taxes on that.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
I just feel in this case with, whew, I just feel that it needs to be, they need, and they're, right now we can't break it down in this full episode on how they should properly do the split, but I think it needs to be, the creators need to receive a larger portion as it trickle downs to the other people who have used it.
So while we're talking about this, what we do on this show, everyone, is we always make sure we get reference points
Yes,
to make sure that we're talking
yes,
about the right thing. I've been looking up in this NPR article, and the author of this article says, there's no real evidence that Warhol knew about the licensing agreement, which we,
yes,
talked about earlier. He just pretty much, or didn't even, let's say he didn't even care. Let's just say
right.
that. So he created these 16 print silk screens, which he then copyrighted, and one of which Vanity Fair used for their article too. So they used one for the article. Um, and like, I guess maybe they used both. I gotta double check it all. So they said silkscreen images has since been sold, reproduced to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars in profits for the Warhol Foundation, the nonprofit that was set up after Warhol's death to promote his work and the visual arts. How does that help Lynn Goldsmith's work, though? You know, I,
I
I,
see, but that's the part where that's the part where they have to break bread, because without that photograph, there's no
Mhm.
16 silkscreen portraits.
Yes. And here's where it gets really, 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 really good. And for everyone that wants to follow this article, it's an NPR article. It's called "The Supreme Court Meets Andy Warhol Prince in a Case That Could Threaten Creativity." It's a really, really great
Yes.
read. So that this talks about, after Prince's death in 2016, Condé Nast, which runs Vanity Fair, they did a tribute featuring many Prince photographs, and it paid the Warhol Foundation $10,000 to run Orange Prince on its cover.
See? See?
So the original photographer continually gets screwed.
Exactly. But that's why,
So now we're looking at so this is even Prince. Prince is even getting
yeah.
screwed. I'm sorry.
No,
Go
but
ahead.
but no,
Because you get me
no,
hype.
but that's why I said it. There has to be something set, because like you just said, Vanity Fair paid
hmm
who? Prince? No,
They paid
they paid
no,
Goldsmith.
they paid the Warhol
Exactly.
Foundation.
They pay,
Goldsmith never got any payment or even credit, so she sued the foundation.
well, that's the thing. That's why I'm saying they need to. That's how you fact check it. If Warhol Foundation is getting all this money for using this stuff, they have to pay the originators. They have to. It's logical. You can't sit here and be like, Warhol created these beautiful pieces. Where do you get the photograph from? We'll come back to you on that. Like, you can't just skip over that and be like, I plead the fifth. No way. You have to tell the
But
truth. You have to.
is the Warhol Foundation the authority to do that, though? Because the
It's
Warhol Foundation didn't create any of
Well,
these
I say
artworks.
I say they're not the foundation of it, but I think because of his fame and cultural
Mhm.
allure, people are just, people look to the side when it comes to popularity, let's just say. Like, if you're big in a
Yeah.
certain realm, a lot of stuff gets overlooked. A lot of things get, we'll fix it. We'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. So I think that's what's messing with Goldsmith, because Warhol's fame is larger than the
Mm-hmm.
voice of, look at what I did. Without me, there's no
Mm-hmm.
him. But they're strong enough to just do at the Warhol thing is almost like crush them under their thumb. Like, Goldsmith's the ant, and here's Warhol. Crush, and we'll take whatever it is. We'll take what we want.
Yeah, you would think that. Okay, so maybe, and I've been thinking about this as we've been talking about it. Like, do you think this case is a case that's huge, not just for creativity and contemporary art, but for Warhol collectors, Warhol buyers, to where it's like, if the Warhol Foundation has to pay this, then will they go bankrupt? Because now this opens up a plethora of cases. Because what if the people, that he took portraits of, and they say, well, I'm Muhammad Ali's, photographer, Herman Bingham. Let's say him. And he says, well, Warhol took one of my photographs. I never said anything about it, but this is obviously my photograph. If Lynn Goldsmith is getting her day, why am I not do mine? Or even, someone like a Richard Prince, who's famously, taken works, that brings all of those works now into question. Who's responsible for paying all these people?
Listen, that's above my pay rate. But I'm going to tell you this. They need to get paid. The originators need to get paid for their photographs, because it'll set a precedent. It's just like sampling music. Before then,
Yes.
not a lot of people paid attention to it, but now when people found out, oh, you're sampling this, like, even if you just sample the bass line of it, or the guitars of it,
Mm-hmm.
or the drum sample,
Or the
you
drums,
have to
yeah.
pay. So what's the difference now between you taking a photograph of a famous person and painting it, like painting over it? What's
Yeah.
the difference? Are you not sampling? It's the same thing.
Exactly. It's like, people are now getting caught up with that because of apps like
Right.
Shazam, and all of that. So they're finding out they playing someone's,
Music. Yeah.
beat or a song, and it comes up as the oldies
Yes.
version of that in Shazam. And they're like, whoa, what is this?
Right.
And ooh, you got a
I just think it's
situation.
gonna have to
So
come. They're gonna have to start Shazam in art. just just
So speaking of that, speaking of Shazam and art, good segue. Because our next topic, we were talking about, augmented reality, or not augmented reality, but artificial intelligence. Augmented reality, we'll be
yeah.
talking about that soon too. But AI, artificial intelligence, what do we feel about that as a sampling? Because it's the same thing as what artificial intelligence is doing. It's getting these, grooves and merges of images from a sampling of the internet, or the wide range of photography, images, creations that are allowed
I
to it.
I'm just
What do you think
curious to
about
know
it?
what the percentage of the photos that they're using to make that one. Because even
Mm,
in because
mm,
like, I know this is an art podcast, but music sampling is the same way. If you sample a certain
mm-hmm,
percentage, you got to pay that royalty fee. So, and I know there's a certain percentage that you can sample without having to pay. So in my head, I
mm-hmm,
feel that the AI art, or the creators of it, found a way to manipulate that code just enough so that they don't have to pay a
mm-hmm,
fee for it. Because even with both of us, we've sat there and we've created random art pieces just with the click. We type uh classic brushstrokes, artworks, goth style, boom, and we get this art piece that just pop. They give us 8
mm-hmm.
different choices. So it's just like, what percentage, that's what I'm curious about, is what percent are they getting away with, that they're just combining, like, okay, we're going to take 1% from this one, 1% from this one. How many percentages are they taking to make this big art piece? That's my first question when it comes to AI, is that.
So my tech background, as well as the art, I look at it in a way to where it's like, all right, how are they searching out not only what images, but what are the ranks,
Yeah,
of
yeah,
these
yeah,
images that are in there. You
yeah.
know what I mean? Because if you type in, let's say, like you talked about it, like goth art, Renaissance, or whatever, into Google, what does that come up? So are they sampling the first, let's say, 50 images, the first 100 images, and with those images, are they just taking parts of the painting that they're sliding around and being able to merge it as part of the code to bring in something new, or are they actually uh, redrawing, recreating based on the methods that they think this art piece is created on, or the calculations? There's no way to really tell that. But the fact that we do know is that they are sampling available
Right.
images. So it's like, I mean, hell, you can say, paint me a picture of the sun, in Van Gogh style. I've seen people do different things and selling
Yeah,
t-shirts, of, show me the
yeah,
hood in Picasso style. And it's a dude in gold teeth. He's cubism and he's sitting on it. Like, you know what I
yeah.
mean? Like, whose photo is that?
Right, 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 right.
Who's the name, image, and likeness in that photo that has now been Picassoized,
Yeah,
at this point? You know what I
yeah.
mean? Because there's somebody behind
I
that.
just think the AI, which is crazy to say, is probably a lot smarter than us, because I feel like if we were to take that and actually study just one AI piece that was created, we could easily
Mm-hmm.
probably, if we sat down and had the time to sit there and connect the dots, we could easily say it's probably like a pool of a good 1,000 different art pieces sampled,
I think
maybe more.
more.
I think
I think
millions
wait,
of them, because
yeah.
art has been all
Mm-hmm.
over, and I just feel that it searches all databases, it searches all collections. It's because 9 times out of 10 everything is online. Like, even if they take the picture down,
Mm-hmm.
someone has it somewhere, it's stored somewhere, and it's just like a spider. It just runs across the internet looking for information to create what is being asked for.
So you make a great damn point again. Is Warhol the spider?
Yes, 100%.
because you, like, when we're in
Yeah,
tech, right? You're just saying, like, so we're looking at it as this AI device, and we know about
yeah,
spiders. Anybody that's messed in tech, understand about web
yeah.
crawling and metadata searching and data mining and things like that. This web crawl is crossing in between these boundaries of the copyrights of these museums, these foundations, these artists'
Hmm.
websites, anything that touches online. So if they're pulling from the World Wide Web, let's just say, which is an open forum, a public forum, do they have rights to these, or are they abiding, or do they have to abide by the rights and regulations of these websites, even if they don't go on these websites? Because you go to a pool of images, you type that in, you type images, you're not going to these websites until you click actually into the image.
Mm.
So you're not signing any, agreement to abide by any corporation, any foundation, any museum's laws on how they protect their images. You just went to a goddamn search.
I hmm. Then I think when it comes to that, excuse me, I believe that if they're searching it, if the spider is searching it and it's searching the website and these images aren't copywritten, because many searches will pop up. Even now, you can Google search an image. If you try to download it, it will tell you that it's
Mm-hmm.
copyrighted now. Before,
Copyrighted.
it
Yep.
didn't have that. It wasn't, the tech wasn't there for that yet. But now they have images that'll tell you like this is copywritten. Like you, so I
Mm-hmm.
feel that it's possibly on that side of it, because Andy took something that was already out there and just added his Andiness to it. This AI is literally searching hundreds of millions of images to create that one picture. But I feel that it is searching. There's so many, you have to think, not many people know how to copyright their work. Not many people
Mm-hmm.
even know that their work is out there freely being used, you know? So it's just
Mhm.
things like that where it's just like, I feel that once it's uploaded to the website or to the internet, it's kind of free game if you haven't gone about it the correct way.
But that's also like saying once once that magazine or whatever hit the newsstands, does that become free game because you purchase it? You know, like there's people that make artwork or, cut out things and, make different things like that. Like because that magazine has now become, public consumption, newspaper, things like that. It's,
Yeah.
news. Does
Um,
that now become your property? Because you're not going to go to jail for destroying it. Like it's nothing like that. You're the owner that created it is not going to come and check to make sure you haven't destroyed, the publication.
I think when it
So,
comes to you making money off of it, that's the issue. Like
mhm.
if
Yeah.
you're a high school student and you're in your art class and you're learning about collaging and you're cutting up magazine pieces to make a certain type of collage or a certain type of look, I don't think anyone's
Mhm.
coming for you. But it's like if you choose to make a career out of collaging and you're making big money and you're starting to, instead of use, like, you get a little bit bolder, I just use this person's right eye,
Mhm.
I just use this person's ear, but then it's just like, well, I'm gonna just use their whole left side. It's like you kind of start to feel
Hmm.
empowered because you start to notice that people, well, nothing's happening to you,
Mhm.
and I feel like
Mhm.
it's like once you're small, no one notices you, but once you start to gain that notoriety, kind of like with Warhol getting that notoriety and blowing up, that's when it becomes an issue, because it's like that starving artist, like you said earlier, like you're a starving artist, you're just creating artwork because you love it, but then someone else who has a higher rank in the art world can come in and literally take your work and make millions of dollars off of it and not pay you anything. It's kind of like,
Mhm.
okay, okay. It doesn't. I just feel it depends on your status.
So let me ask this then. Does it take for an AI artist to make millions off of the AI art to have someone to check at, let's say, like data points, like what you mentioned earlier of how many or which specific images were used at a certain percentage? And if they could actually provide that data, whose responsibility is it to pay 1,000 copyright owners? Is it that artist or is it the gallery that sells
The
it? Because
artist,
an artist can
the artist.
okay. But an artist can contend, and this is my devil's advocate, that I created this for practice, not for the market. The market was entered when it was put on the wall by the gallery for purchase for a
Hmm.
collector. So now does that become a tax?
It would have to be. I think it would have to be, because it gets to the point where the artist is legit making a living off of it. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
that's where it becomes um like where you're starting to become profitable and your name is growing, but you're using the likeness of other people. It gets to the point, because I guarantee you, if there was an artist that was trying to recreate Andy Warhol now, oh, oh no, it's
Mhm.
not happening. We're not going to, Andy Warhol's people are going to be like, Andy Warhol created this style and we have this and that. So
Yeah.
you have to think of it that way, where it's like you have lower level artists that can do Andy Warhol-esque type work,
Mhm.
but once they
Mhm.
hit a certain level of notoriety, that's where it changes. So even with the AI art, when, like, remember the gentleman we were speaking on, I think we talked about it a couple of weeks ago on the phone, about the dude that entered into an art piece into the art show
Yeah.
and won. So
And
yes, and
one.
people
Yep.
were pissed because no one checked to make sure the authentication of it until afterwards, until he had won the money, until he had got the top prize. So I just feel that
Mhm.
they need to have a very clear outline, that it needs to be like original work. you need to be, I think it has to be on most galleries and spaces to like do the work, investigate it, do the deep dive, take the time out to go and visit, talk to people about it, because that's like something we've said
Yeah.
before. It's like if you don't know this person's practice and you just say,
Mhm.
"Oh, wait, you got 280K followers on Instagram, your poster getting 10K likes, we'll give you a show." But then it comes out that they're using
Yeah.
AI art. It's like
Yeah.
uh-oh.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. And to be fair, like I think Warhol would have been all for this AI
Oh
shit.
yeah.
Like he would have been all
Oh
for it, man.
yes.
Like I think he would have been the champion
Oh
for it.
yes.
All
100%.
of this, and
100%.
I think he would have enjoyed the Richard Princes and all of these, people that are doing these different type of things with works. I think he would have enjoyed it. I think he would have, made it easier. Um, but also I don't think his market would have been as big because he would have been just pumping out works, because I believe Warhol, as much as a capitalist and a commercialist as he was, I also think he was an
Yeah.
artist to where he just liked to create. From what I've read and seen of him, I felt that he understood marketing, he understood advertising, he understood commercialism, but he wanted to
Yeah.
create. He wanted to be a celebrity and just
I'm not
create.
mad at that, but you got to pay. You got to pay.
Yeah. I mean, but you gotta pay. I mean, but there's people that, I had a conversation with someone and they were talking about, and as we've talked about, like, should art be as easy as typing words into a dialogue box and bringing out some of the best, you know, creative thinking on a visual level that you've seen? Like, is, the same thing like with the Warhol, is him taking images that he scraped together, meaning quote unquote keywords, merging them together and silk screening them into a piece. Are we looking at a regeneration of that same artistic process with AI? I think Warhol and AI is a good thing to look at.
I feel that they're in the same breath. He
Mm.
was the
Mhm.
AI before AI. Yeah, he
AW.
was. It was AW, not AI. And there and I just think um what you said, I would just have to differ a little bit, because you have to think
Yeah.
of the time period in which Andy Warhol was coming up. Who were the popping artists at that time? What were they creating
Mhm.
at that time? It was a very abstract period. You know what I mean? We had very big household names of painters. Nobody, but no
Yeah.
one was going to this extent of using imagery like him. Were they? No, they
Yeah.
weren't. So it's just like,
No, not really, no.
but
No.
then now,
But the photographers, the
yes,
only imagery came from, like, the pictures
yes,
generation. They were bringing out the real the Diane
yes,
Arbises and all those photographers. They were the real images we were
yes,
getting.
yes,
You know what I mean? But besides
yes.
painting.
So now that we have I feel that it's not bringing in anything new. It's bringing in something quicker, but it's not bringing in anything new.
Mhm.
Andy brought in something new. It was a different type of like renaissance,
Mm.
I would say, when it comes to art during his period of when he started to create.
Mhm.
But with AI art, I don't see it as a renaissance. I see it as more of a um, easy monetary tool. I see it as a very quick tool for practice if done correctly.
Mhm.
Um,
A good
like a
sketchbook.
sketchbook. I see it as that. I don't see this as something um breaking news that, these Warhol, like not Warhol, but these AI arts are going to reframe how people create. I still believe you have your diehard painters, your diehard photographers, your diehard
Yeah.
sculptors. Like I don't see this as, I don't see AI as the way of like creating a new renaissance in art. I feel that people will see it as a just another tool.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that, as time evolves with AI too, the people around, in these positions that own galleries, that curate shows, that collect work, will start to, grow up with AI as an
Yeah,
option. There's people, that collect, NFTs, as we know now, and other things, because they've grown up in a digital age where, they've grown up with a lot of this as a handy item or a handy object or something to value, we should say. So over the years, I could see AI creeping into a major museum, um, as something of value, because the collectors or the donors that grew up with this are going to start to be interested in it. I mean, the same way that contemporary art starts to, overrun the
I would
museums
agree
now.
with you. I would, because it
Yeah.
just takes one to bring value. It
Just
just
takes
takes
one.
one to bring value to it, and then there'll be that one AI artist that sets the precedent for the next generation of AI artists. But I don't think, but I don't think it's
Exactly.
going to be this big, huge renaissance of it. I still think people are still
Mm,
going to want to see the paintings, the brush strokes, the original art thoughts.
I
I feel
agree.
that people still want that, because it's like people will pay for handcrafted pieces.
Mhm.
Computer, if they know it can
Mhm.
be done on the computer, it almost, I hate to say it, almost devalues it a little bit. But
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
like, I think it leans more towards, like, it's just going to take that one to get into a gallery, and then that's going to set the precedent. It's almost like David Cho painting Facebook.
Mhm.
People didn't care who he was back then. No one paid attention to
Yep.
him back
Yep.
then. It took one person from Facebook that
Yep.
saw his art show and his artwork, and that allowed him to paint. It took one. That's all it took. And now look where he is. Look
Mhm.
where he sits now. So it's just like, I get it. But we don't see many artists creating that David Cho esque art, where it's very,
Yeah.
the hard lines, the somewhat muted
Mhm.
colors. Now we don't see that anymore,
Mhm.
because when he did it and he got hot, we saw a lot of it. But because he was the
Mhm.
first to do it, and he still continues to do it at a higher level, people are going to be like, okay, he's the one for it. So that's the way I see it as
Yeah.
AI art. It's going to take that one person to get that one look, and they're going to set the precedent, and we're going to see a ton of people try to create it. But then when you compare it to the original, they're going to be like, the that's why would we get yours when the original is literally 10 times better than what you're creating?
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing like with museums hopping on, collecting NFT
Oh,
art.
yeah.
Like, I went to the LACMA thing where they had Tom Sachs, the
Yeah.
rocket launch, which was very lukewarm, to say the least. But it was this whole, act, put on, that this rocket was being launched and it was going to be the first one to go in the LACMA's collection. And they made this spectacle about it, and I was like, people are going to forget about this rocket in 48 hours. How memorable, is this art piece, or is this just to say, we have this in this collection? So I think, to kind of like wrap up on this topic, like, AI is going to be
It
tested.
is. Yes.
It's going to be
Yes.
tested. If it can pass that test, um then maybe, because I do think, like you said, it's a great form of sketching, getting your ideas of where you want to go with something. It's a great tool for
Yes.
that. Just building something up. But I like the human
I do too.
hand. What do you say?
I'm
Pause.
No, I agree with you. I'm a fine artist myself, and that the 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 human touch to art elevates it, because it's
Yeah.
coming from a story, a person's hands that's touch a piece of artwork. They're not only telling their story, it's generations of stories that are living through them, from family
Yes.
members to cousins to uncles to um teachers to people that have influenced them. So I feel that that will always outweigh the digital work. Yes.
Facts. And also, so you're like the king of segues, because our next final topic for this episode, we were talking about, museums, being able to give back and starting to give back, artifacts to countries. We were looking at one where the Smithsonian gave back 29 Benin bronzes to Nigeria, and their director, Lonnie Bunch, pretty much was saying, we're not the owners, and it's really, really interesting, especially with the stories that, we just were talking about when we spoke about ownership and who owns it, and especially with museums and their collections. And to look at this and say, man, this is a museum director saying, we don't own this, and taking responsibility of saying that the ownership is in the authors or the creators, in this case, the country. How do you feel about this conversation that these institutions are now starting to have?
It took too long. It just took too long.
Facts.
Let's just call it what it is. It's like you went to a country that was rich in resources and you just took what you wanted
Facts.
without paying, and now your grandchildren are paying for it. And I think that it just took too long. I honestly believe it took too long, just off of the strength that there have been many great countries that have taken from many now poor countries, and now
Mm-hmm.
that you have those rightful educators or rightful curators or rightful directors in there looking at this saying, you know what, if they would have this stuff, they could probably generate their own wealth. They could probably
Yeah.
generate something
Yeah.
better for themselves instead of us charging a fee to look at artworks that don't even belong to us. Now, if they lease it from them, if they put it on a 6 to 2 year stay, I'm totally okay. But it goes back to what I've always said is the originator needs to get something.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost
Mm-hmm.
like this is just a larger scale of Goldsmith versus Warhol, where it's like you have
Exactly.
this small country in Nigeria, not wealthy, not rich, but their artifacts that were plundered, which drove this country to the state that it is now in art galleries getting viewed and charging $27 or $30 a pop to come in and watch, and you're getting 150 to almost 300 people a day to come look at that, and you're pocketing all that, and the
Mm-hmm.
originating country doesn't get anything. It's like we're talking about the same thing here. The originators need to either
Yeah.
get paid for it or just give it back to them. I stand on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and to piggyback off of that, a lot of these countries, they don't give a damn about the financial gain. They want their culture
100%.
back. You know, they want their history back. And, being that we talked about, Lynn Goldsmith, AI, Warhol, and all of that, it's like, you know, do we give these artists back their culture? Do we give these creatives, these countries, these entities back their culture? And we meaning the institution, all of us that view these artworks, that enjoy these artworks still, when they're in our institutions, do we give them back knowing that, they're housed, and there's countries. So it takes me back to a quote that I had seen in a documentary about African art. An artist had said, Picasso makes all of these great sculptures and paintings referencing African art, masks,
Mm-hmm.
and things of that nature. And he said, you know, they're great for him, but imagine how inspired an African could be if they could see those same paintings and sculptures in their own history. So I believe this is, more than just, financially important. It's, culturally, it's a humanitarian act.
Right. Right.
Like it has to be. You can't just send digitals over there
I
either.
just To me, I think it's just going to take a well educated and well diverse person to get into these collections and say, it's almost like you go through your closet once or twice a year. I
Mm,
don't wear this I don't
mm,
need this. It's like, it's not like that, but it's like, this isn't ours. We didn't pay for this. No one loaned us this. We need to
mm-hmm.
give it back, because it
Yeah.
it's the clip from um Black Panther, when
Mm,
Killmonger walks
mm-hmm.
into the
Mm-hmm.
museum, looks at it.
Yeah.
So, can you tell me about this art piece? And she's breaking it down. Well,
Mm-hmm.
this is a 19th century, da 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 da. And he was like, no, it's not. This is this tribe. And she was like, well, how do you know? Oh, because they're my people. So I'm gonna take this off your hands
Straight
from you,
up.
because you didn't get this from.
I'm gonna make this
Right.
happen. Yeah, like I'm gonna make
Yeah,
this
yeah, yeah.
happen.
Don't worry about it. You can't do that. Oh, but y'all did. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's very much of the,
And that was
yeah,
pivotal. That was a pivot. I think that scene actually really kicked back
yeah.
off the talks in of all of this, because that scene was
That's
huge.
exactly,
Like,
yeah,
yo, I'm coming back to get my
yeah.
shit.
And I just think, and I think, to be honest with you, um, I don't know. I feel that it it will uplift so many people.
Yeah,
A
I
country
agree.
that can have its own art gallery to show its own artifacts. Oh my gosh, imagine that. Like, even here on this
Yeah,
land, having Native Americans is 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 them having their own space to have their artifacts shown. I feel this very is very powerful, and I think it uplifts another
yes.
generation to just take pride in what their ancestors came from, because it's like, we're at a point now
Mhm.
where many people don't have any cultural ties to anything, because
They
they
don't
don't
know.
know.
Yep.
And so
They
I
don't.
think with galleries and museums starting to recognize that, people will probably go and help these places show these artworks. Don't just ship them back in a box and just say, here. People aren't going to know with it. Help them
Mhm.
build these art galleries. Help them, give the funding to them. If you want to be really helpful, supply funding to these places until they can get on their feet. Like, do things like that. That
Facts.
would be, I think, astronomical for some of these cultures, man. Like, it'll be very strong, man. So yeah,
It would change the
absolutely.
game. It would really change the
Absolutely.
game. But that's what they got to want to do that.
Yes.
You know, like it takes people wanting to build bridges. It takes
Yeah.
people wanting to draw these connections. And once these museums wake up and understand the benefit in drawing all these connections, man, imagine the type of shows we'll
Oh
really
yeah.
have. You know,
Yeah.
the conversations we really can have about things, to where, you know, you show transatlantic stories and things that, you know, really will show the making of man,
Right.
because that's what art's supposed to
Yep.
be about. You know, the journey of
Yeah.
man, you know, and man as a man and woman,
Right.
you know, not just saying, you know, man as a singular
Yes.
entity. But I hope everybody understands what we mean. So
Yes. All right. So as we wind down this conversation, we'd like to bring up our artist spotlight for this podcast. And Badir, let's speak on our artist spotlight today.
yeah, so for this artist, this is an artist whose work that I've known for a bit, but I never really truly actually seen her or known about her. I caught the name a few times, but the work has been beautiful. But she left us this week. She passed away at 52. Silke Otto-Knapp. I'm just going to read a blurb from Art Forum about her. Um, she was born in 1970 in Osnabrück, Germany, and grew up on a dairy farm, which instilled in her a love of nature, which you can kind of see in her works, especially with the color. She majored in cultural studies at the University of Hildesheim before earning her MFA from Chelsea College of Art and Design, now in Chelsea College of Arts in London, which I'm very familiar with. Having by this time already discovered her preferred technique of applying watercolor to canvas and removing it with a water or dry sponge, Otto-Knapp began making works taking photographs as their reference and depicting barely seen people and places. These paintings recall J.M.W. Turner and their hues and romanticism, and Jennifer Higgy noted in a 2003 issue of Freeze the remnants of old hand-tinted photographs left in the rain in their smudge and liquid appearance, which had the effect of accenting, minimizing, or otherwise rendering strange otherwise ordinary objects, a brick in Otto-Knapp's world more fragile than a leaf, Higgy remarked. So you can see that her work was very revered. I saw a piece of hers today at the Hammer Museum for the What She Says show with Joan Didion, which is beautifully curated. And I'm sure she will be missed by the arts community, and her works will definitely live on because there are tons of, beautiful collections and just the works there. So salute to Silke, and rest in peace for sure, for sure.
Yes, yes, she was
Yeah,
dope,
she
man.
was.
I'm looking at the in the waiting room. I love this one
Yeah.
because it just speaks a lot to, like, it just speaks with the tones of grays and blacks.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like, wow, unless you're right up on it, you won't even tell that those are actually brush strokes.
Yeah.
So it's like it, it's so sad that we lost
So
her,
young
but
too.
I'm glad. Yeah, yeah. And I'm just glad that we have her artworks to continue the conversation of, like, female fine artist work,
Exactly.
fine artistry.
And it's
Yes.
wild how many artists that we go through in museums, and we see tons and tons of works, and we just see a name, and we don't really get to know the full background of the artist until something like this happens, or until they have a major retrospective, because there are just so many artists, let alone great
Yeah.
artists, that you can't read every monograph, you can't read every
You
bio,
can't.
you can't learn about every artist. So when you get a chance to
Yes.
do that, and that's it's kind of what our artist spotlights are for, to give us that moment to learn, and also to help our audience learn about a new artist and someone that was very critical and a huge part of our art world.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for listening to our podcast. My name is Justin Robinson.
And I'm Badir McCleary, and we're the Art School Graduates, and this is the Art School Graduates Podcast.